Just gonna wait. We're just waiting till the top of the hour. Hi. So today I want to start by talking about this is actually create a world. If you ever had anything to do with theater, there are these prior opening night vignettes where your friends and family can come and sit in the audience and watch the rehearsals. So I'm working out some things. I'm working out how to get this on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, Create a World. And I'm also, today Dr. Heather Hunt and I are in Truth or Consequences. It was just easier since we were both here just to come on Facebook Live. But it will be uploaded to YouTube, Create a World, if you want to go back and see it later. And I will post that link on here for you. I want to start the conversation in a particular way, and then I'm going to turn it over to Heather for a bit. I've really been looking at something the past few weeks. It's an interesting phenomenon because somehow my memories go back to the Renaissance era and other places, but I can't help but think about the activity that we're in right now. You know, you could say very easily that this Facebook Live and others are, not just mine, but others, are really like in the Renaissance era where we all went to the cafe and we sat down with our wine and our bread and cheese and we talked. We would come hear people talk about new ideas and new thought processes and not just facts or truth. It really wasn't like that. It wasn't like it is now with the church has spouted a truth. But the philosophers and the scientists, they were mostly in inquiry. They're most questioning the assumed known facts. And they were sharing what they were present to that hadn't yet become this fallacy of perception called truth. So I've really been humbled by what is occurring, particularly with the prophetics and what's rising and the opportunity we really have to be in inquiry, in curiosity, in exploration. Because the ultimate truth is only what you hold to be true. What you experience is real. There really isn't anything else. I have spent my life in experiences that had no validity in the logic or reason-based world, and yet somehow I'm 75 years old, lively, able to have transmuted my body, or have the body transmute, more accurately said, and and be present to the wonders of creation in a manner that none of trying to stay inside the lines of logic and reason and what others told me should be real for me held water. So before we get started today, or as we get started today, that's really why Create a World was formed. Create a World was formed to just be in conversation, just to be in thought processes. And I know people write up their comments, and it is sort of like a soiree with guest speakers, and I want it that way. I want us to constantly be reflecting what today Heather and I say, but reflecting it against your own truth. You know, we have an addiction. Humanity has a very bad addiction among many. But one of the worst addictions humanity has is not to thine own self be true. We listen for authorities outside ourselves to tell us what's real for us. And that's not real. There's nothing about it that's real. Otherwise Jesus couldn't have walked on water, and the pygmies in Africa could not have done ceremony where they experienced things that most people not of that type of culture can experience. So as we get started today, as we record this message to whoever watches it, we really want to be in a conversation for what we're paying attention to and what we're excited about. And your job is simply to apply it to yourself and see what fits for you, see what resonates with you. The worst thing we can do in these conversations is try to listen to Heather and I or anyone as if we're telling the truth. No, we're telling you what we're present to, what we've opened up into, and actually what capacity, and for me and for her, what capacities we see are possible for human beings now. But it isn't for you to then grade yourself on whether you are having that experience or not. It's to take what is relevant for you and add that to your repertoire of to thine own self be true. Know thyself. There is nothing else. And Creator World was really formed for that. It's all happening in synchronicity. Deb asked for 2 weeks. Deb Merchant of the Vital Psyche, she asked for 2 weeks to explore something. We gave her that, 2 Fridays. And then Heather and I are here. We're writing a book that's called MetaBody, and you as a MetaBody, and Creator World showed up inside that vernacular. And that's the listening of today. And the other thing is there's a reason I work on the web. It's not by accident I'm on Facebook Live. It's because I understand the power of the electromagnetic field. I understand the power of virtual reality. I understand that even though there's those of us on this call today and those of us that will watch it, we're in an energy field right now. We're in an electromagnetic energy field. And what Heather and I are sharing is going out into that field. It just looks like people are listening. What's really going on is we're streaming. That's what it says even. We're streaming. We're streaming a phenomenon that we've been experiencing, that the vibrational frequencies of our voices going out into the virtual electromagnetic field will be registered. And frankly, that's enough for me. And when you begin to build the strength, stamina, capacity to actually trust creation, people think this is about Facebook. No, it's about linking into the powers and forces of creation. Silly humans. That's what it's about. So I want to address Dr. Heather Hutt. I'm going to call her Heather. I'll let her say what she does. Put her on the hot spot like people put me on the hot spot about that question. But mostly, when I met Heather, she was trying to pay attention to something she didn't have any language for. And there wasn't any language. In fact, it's been unfolding. In fact, the word metabody came out of an unfolding inquiry of what she was present to. What she was finding she was paying attention to and trying to find a way to language it that made it distinct from, showed the distinctions or the difference between what she'd been taught and what she learned and what she was finding happening when she was working with people on the table and in her own thinking and other things she's been exploring. So there's a premise that she and I operate in together, and that premise is a different way of actually perceiving than most of humanity. Humanity perceives, let's say, the body at the effect of the world around it. That's the simple way to say it. But the phenomenon she and I both share is, in our own manner, I have always seen the body as the unity of spirit and flesh, where spirit is always active in the body and trying to get the body to be a good house for spirit. while the body has been threatened by the world it found itself in, by toxicity and stress, and overcome by its need to keep the spirit being inside itself alive. And then we started to notice something in 2016, that there was something happening, that perhaps all the consciousness work that human beings have been doing, perhaps all the desire to return to a way of existing that we remember in our cellular, at the level of our cellular system, and recalls and remembrances and memories, that the body was beginning to hear that perhaps we could hear, that the personality structure could hear, that this thing we're sitting in is a house of spirit, and that maybe once again the streaming from above to below became available, and perhaps, we'll see, we don't know, we leave this for your reflection, just perhaps. I know Heather and I are operating in this what we've gotten present to and opened up into quite thoroughly ourselves, but we leave it to you for your reflection. This phenomenon that perhaps the body, which in the terminology of the field of Tantra Maat is this unity, the meta point of spirit and flesh, that this body is actually in an awakening process independent of the personality's opinion about itself or its mortal coil. So Heather's been in conversation. I've asked her to have it this morning with you, whatever comes up. And the conversation is about last night when we were working, discussing the book and discussing how to frame the book, You as a MetaBody. She made the statement, for me, for me is her saying this, for me it's all about coming in from above into the below. And I have asked her this morning to comment on that and just say whatever's present to her. Over to you, Heather.
Thank you. I'll introduce myself. I'm a chiropractor and cranial sacral therapist, and I practice functional medicine in a little town in the foothills of Northern California called Nevada City. And I feel like something that is unique to me is I was raised in a chiropractic paradigm. My dad's a chiropractor, and chiropractic itself has a really holistic paradigm of looking at the body, and it actually has quite mystical origins, and it can be quite fanatical in some ways, but it's the only healthcare system I really know of that has these kind of mystical origins that we'll talk about today, and also really an understanding of function in the body, and how things work and how they're supposed to feel. And like after you are, the training of chiropractic is, you have to do the pre-med college coursework and then 4 years of chiropractic college. It's rigorous, but you don't get the real wisdom of it until you really start putting your hands on bodies and start feeling what's occurring. And then if you're paying attention, you get to the point where you can feel if it's a joint problem or a muscle problem or an inflammation problem, or if it's something from the viscera, the gut, referring to the spine. And then the chiropractic miracle cures often can happen when they do an adjustment in the joints, and it cures something in the visceral, because those the nervous system is, connects the spine to the organs to the spine. And so there's a lot of complexity within my work, and then also a lot of insights that come just by merely being with people and tracking over time what's occurring in people's bodies with my hands. And chiropractic means to practice with hands. I also do cranial sacral therapy, which I would consider the real kind of energetic part of my work. I really love the word etheric, which for me is like energetic. It's that which isn't really in form. So I'll probably use that a lot today, because I feel like it's important to this conversation. But the cranial sacral therapy, I was trained through the Upledger Institute in 2008 and have been doing that since then. And the cranial itself is what really made me need Tantra and the field of Tantra Maat in a way that my chiropractic questions, I could ask my dad, I could ask colleagues, I could track what I was feeling. There was enough information that I felt like I could draw my conclusions and gain wisdom in my experience with chiropractic. But in the cranial sacral, I began to be present to things that I didn't have language or structure to. So when Tantra, who used to live in our area, came in as a patient at the end of 2015 to review some blood work with me as part of the functional medicine, just in that, and she had ordered her own blood work through my office, so I hadn't ever done an intake or anything, and she came in to review the results, so I was already a little bit not on my typical routine of getting to know someone. But through that hour of reviewing her results, she started explaining what I had been feeling in people's bodies through my cranial sessions, what I was tracking, and I basically glommed onto her, and we did our first call together in the field of Tantra Maat in 2016, and then basically since February 2016, so almost 6 years, as of now, I've pretty much done everything she's offered, and then including putting a lot of pressure on her to finish her second book within the creation exercises, The Mind of Creation, which we did for the last few years with a lot of pressure this last year, because I knew I needed that in place so that I could create and have language and structure for what I'm present to. So it's really a shared field, and when my family says, because I have 3 little kids, 3 little boys, why are you going down there again? Why are you taking so long away from us? I say to them, I try to explain to them my mission. And then I also say, no one will sit with me for a whole week and just talk about like the body and what I'm listening to and what I'm paying attention to. And we literally, I feel so grateful because I track things in my practice in the body that I don't know where to turn. The chiropractor Joe Dispenza is the one place that I've found some answers, but I really don't, because I have a highly skeptical mind, and in fact, I'm married into a family of scientists and doctors, and my husband has a PhD from Stanford in biology. So that's the caliber that I'm always balancing my kind of mystical nature, what I've discovered as my mystical nature, and what I can pay attention to etherically and bring in, and then my critical mind of like, I can't even muscle test because I don't believe it. I can't do it. There's no inner examiner reliability in my mind. It's just so I'm in this quandary all the time between, and I wouldn't call myself a scientist. I just call myself a critical thinker. But between my critical thinking and not wanting to accept things as truth that other people just tell me, or make a system for that, I don't really see the point of that system. I really have to experience it myself in my own body usually, or now in the bodies of my patients, and then make sense of that. So Tantra has been an invaluable asset in her study of consciousness for over 50 years, and I feel really grateful for the field of Tantra Maat so that I can really bring forward what we are working on, and it maybe sounds a little presumptuous, but as a new model of healing, where we really do, in the Eastern world, this is not new, looking at spirit and flesh and giving space for spirit, but in the Western world, it is quite unheard of in a lot of ways, to really give our spirit and our etheric natures a place. So what I wanted to start out with, what she asked me to talk about, was how I see healing occur in the body. So the old chiropractors had a saying that healing happens from above, down, inside, out. And I pay a lot of attention to that flow on the table, and also in my life as far as thinking about the mystical mind and how we work. To me, I would think that everybody, because it comes like so naturally to me, that everybody has this register to pay attention to what is not yet in form, and then to keep paying attention until it maps out, and then we can bring it into form. But what I've learned is that that isn't really true. Maybe it is, I'm not sure, maybe that's awakening now. But I really love thinking about that myself and giving people language through my field of how to work with these energies. So basically, I see my body as like a river. And this image came to me when Tantra and I were doing a retreat actually here in New Mexico with a man named Joseph. And in one of the last days of that retreat, I really saw myself as a river and a confluence of all these different streams and rivulets and everything coming in. And that image has stayed with me really strongly, especially with the healing happens from above down, inside out. And so how I see that is that we are connected to that which goes beyond our matter. And we have a timeless and eternal nature. And so the more we can kind of open ourselves and be in acceptance of these currents coming into us, these threads, the more we can really be in our being and feel our eternal natures. And so so that we can really actualize, as Tantra says, what we came here to be, do, and have. So what I've experienced in the past is that which I'm connected to has often caused a lot of panic and anxiety. And that was what really threw me into this work, because in 2015, I actually started having panic attacks, which I had never had. I could trace worry in my life as being a little bit of a worrier, but never knowing the word anxiety as something, and definitely not panic. But January of 2015, they started in. And so I couldn't figure that out. I mean, basically what it felt like was that I was dying, that something was really wrong, and that I was dying in my cells. And I couldn't get my mind, to think it differently. And because that sensation was so overwhelming, and it was like I was completely captured. And so I had 3 little kids. My youngest baby was like not even 1. I was on max overwhelm. And so when I met Tantra, so my what I did was I figured this is all physical. So I did every blood test, gut test, hormone test, and I did find imbalances, which I set about fixing, because I did just have 3 babies in 5 years and was running a business and was on overwhelm and did have these physiological imbalances that helped determine how I was feeling in the world and in my body. But then when all those sort of corrected is I still didn't feel good, and I still was feeling all this anxiety. And so when I met Tantra, she really explained to me how the famous Tantra quote is, awakening is a biological experience. And that was certainly something I was feeling in my own body. And it didn't feel at all comfortable. And what it felt like was these waves of anxiety would come through, and I would just completely be at the effect of them. And I could trace them to, news on my phone, or my baby crying, or something happening at work that was stressful. But sometimes they just came completely what I was calling inappropriate anxiety, like completely out of the blue. And I had no idea why they were there. And, I developed some methods for how to deal with them with like supplements, but nothing was really getting kind of to the root of it. And so as we've worked more and more, what I realized is that what I was really connected to, these higher frequencies coming in, and these threads, these rivulets, were coming in with really high frequency, and they were coming in fast. And my cells were misinterpreting them as anxiety, because they feel a lot like it, and panic. And also, Tantra has a lot of really great language around boundary markers. And basically a boundary marker is something that's kind of inherent in it. Like, it's not inherent and innate, but it's like a torque in the system of our reality, where when something we're connected to that's very powerful, so how I experience it is something that I'm connected to that's very powerful, when it starts coming in, I have a boundary marker of like, oh, that's not safe. Oh, that's, last time you tried that, you were burnt at the stake. There's these weird, or you might go crazy. That was a big one for me. Watch out, you might go crazy. You might really lose it. And so these boundary markers, and actually my dad told me a story recently, even an Old Testament story about Moses, when his people were thirsty, creating water for him, and God getting mad at Moses and punishing him and saying, how dare you do this work? So it's like I was feeling this increased energy flow and having more and more sort of miracles happen, like metaphysical things happen on the table. And at the same time, I was experiencing these boundary markers of like, no, who are you to think you can do that? Who do you think, like you might be crazy, you might be going crazy, you might lose it, this might be it. And obviously that's not at all helpful, but it's quite effective if you want to keep people in a certain box. So through Tantra and working in the field of Tantra Maat, that's what I realized is what I was connected to was what I had the most fear around. So primal forces, for instance, like even as a child, I was highly afraid of lightning and fires, and I memorized our code, because in Nevada City they used to, from the fire station downtown, used to have a blasting of Morse code of where the fire was, so all the volunteer firefighters and stuff could just go directly, and regular firefighters most likely. And I knew our code as a 7-year-old because I was so, and one night they called it and there was a fire a few streets over, and I looked at it, I knew, I went over and I said, you guys look, it's right there. And so as I got older and have been working with Tantra, I realized I'm quite connected to fire. I'm quite connected to volcanoes and some of these primal forces that literally cause panic. One time we stayed on the mouth of the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii at the volcano house as a child as a special treat, my mom thought, and I didn't sleep all night. I was so petrified. And I think it was because I was feeling, reflecting back, it was that I was feeling what I'm connected to, what was speaking to me, but I had no tools to actually welcome those frequencies into my cells and work with them instead of having them just blow me out. So that's been my personal work for the last 6 years, is kind of what I can expand into when these higher frequencies start coming through, and tracking where, I'm always like, why, how, when, what. And so now I have ways of tracking, I've created articles and stuff on the physiological ways we can track, are you running low blood sugar, or did you not eat a good dinner last night, or things, where are you in your cycle, things like that. But the things I've gotten also good at tracking are what phase is the moon in, where are we astrologically, what's happening. I don't pay attention to the news because that's something that blows me out. But once in a while, I'll hear of a story that, is happening in the world that I know I'm responding to. And it's actually helpful at that point, that something had caught my attention. And once I identify it, then at this point, I just pray about it. I know that I'm connected to it. I don't know what I can do about it. Often there's nothing I can, quote, do. It's, write letters to whoever, but that's not how I'm going to spend my time. So what I do is I just connect in now and really pray about that situation, knowing that as it reaches out towards me and as it's threading into me, I must have some sort of involvement in it. So I have to trust that as I put my intentions and my prayers into it, that's the way I can help right now. And so I've developed these different tricks for myself of how to identify and how to work with. But basically, I think the work that we're really in right now that I'm seeing on the table is how do we accept these higher frequencies that are coming in really fast. We're in such a moment of change and transition. Even with the planet, as everybody should know about global climate change, in my opinion. But how do we deal with that? You know, my point of entry is the physical body. I have always felt more matter than spirit, even though I've always had, you know, this like paradigm in my family of healing happens from above down, inside out. Another one is the power that from chiropractic is the power that made the body heals the body. So I was, and my dad has a very strong message of just don't get in the way. Your body knows what to do. Just don't interfere. Don't eat crap. Get enough rest. Like your body knows what to do. And indeed, my dad like won't even take an Advil. Like he is such a purist. So how do we in ourselves expand out, remember that there's these currents moving through us, how to pull in when we need to pull in, like what are the actual functionings of the cells in order to maintain these higher frequencies. And before we get into that a little more, because I want to pull Tantra in that piece, I want to give a shout out to a really incredible book that Tantra introduced me to probably 6 years ago by Jeremy Rifkin called Empathic Civilizations. And he's actually an economist who wrote a really incredible book, Tracking Empathy, which is one of my passions, because I realized most of what I was suffering from was empathic response to the world, was my empathic design that wasn't being supported by our outside world, that is reality that doesn't support my sensitivities. So I'm the weird one. I'm the one that has the problems in a basically toxic soup that we're swimming in, which is totally messed up. And one of my big themes of a few years ago was the things that we think of as our deficiencies and our sensitivities are actually our greatest strengths. And really letting that be my experience. And now it is. You know, now I don't blame myself when I can't watch the news or I can't watch scary movies or I have to leave something early or, you know, like I need to just chill out. I don't see that as a deficiency anymore. I see it as part of taking care of my design. But Jeremy Rifkin does a really incredible job talking about the transition from verbal to written language in human history. And it wasn't that long ago. I think it was like 4,000 years. I can't remember. I read this years ago now. But basically, he tracks the development of empathy in culture by the development of individuality. Because in order to feel empathically, you have to have an idea of sense and other. And so his big argument was that when we lived in more tribal collective communities, it was like if you wronged one person, you wronged the whole tribe. So I think of Romeo and Juliet. You know, you wrong one person in the family, you kill the whole family. But then as writing came in, people were, and reading, people were able to have more of their own individual experience. And it actually, because you could sit and read a book or you could sit and write. And as that individual experience started emerging, and reading and writing, it changed the brain. And I've been a journaler since I was 12, so I know how my brain thinks differently when I sit down with pen and paper and I write, and I can sequence my thoughts, and I can understand how I'm feeling, you know, through writing. And it's very different than how we speak and how language is and how knowledge is transmitted. And so one really special thing about this time in human history is that we're in another huge change that I don't think has been given enough focus as far as our human bodies, which is going from written to digital. So Tantra talked about the EMFs, but just the mere fact that we have more information at our fingertips through our cell phones than ever any ancestors ever had in their whole lifetimes in like a second, you know, like this is changing our brain. And those of us who are in the time that we were born in, remembering no computers and no internet, you know, we got our first when I was in high school, and we had dial-up, so it's not like you were surfing the web much to remember. Then getting cell phones, and then now I feel like managing the amount of time we spend on these devices and the amount of overwhelm and overstimulation, and using them as a real tool for our self-awakening instead of being at the effect of them, like using them intelligently. And I love them when used that way. But just how that is changing our experiences in our bodies, and being cognizant of just how what we expose ourselves to, because we are in a huge, like my children will be different. They will never, their brains are different than mine, just in the fact that they will never know life without internet, without cell phones, without, oh, I'm going to Google that, right now, and we're going to know why. And so I think we need to give ourselves a lot of grace and space, and also recognize ourselves as pioneers in this moment of time, because we really have no layout. And those of us in this time where we were born before this digital age, we're really in the adaptation and the evolution of how do our cells evolve to meet, and how do our brains with neuroplasticity make new pathways, and how do we do this in a way that isn't falling into the dominant rhetoric of fear and anxiety and like alarm and reaction, and really do it in a way that we can use it to on behalf of all life, really, and generating new wholes and new, like my favorite definition of healing is this from a Sanskrit word, Tantra found in 2016, I think, called swasthya, and it means healing as establishment in self. So how do we, because my true belief is that inside our bodies we have this innate wholeness. We came in with this incredible miraculous design where spirit and flesh are wedded in this physical form, and they're both necessary to nurture and tend to, in order to have, I think, a truly healthy whole life. And so how, as we kind of move out of our dominant cultures and dominant realities, and regain our inner landscape as our true reality, and make that our dominant reality on the outside world, is how do we do that, in our bodies, and how we're paying attention. And so I just want to say one more thing about the paying attention, which I think is really valuable, and I just wrote a blog on actually this morning. But how do we track? And this has been something Tantra is really, right at the beginning, she said, oh, you're tracking. And I was like, what are you talking about? So basically it's part of our mystical natures and working with the etheric, but something pings you, and or for me, something starts occurring on the table, where if I have a few people within the course of a week or two that are having the same thing happen in their body, I know there's something coming in. So then I just start tracking it. Or like I had a big thing happen with the goddess Hestia, where I can't remember how I first heard that word, but I'll take a screenshot of something, I'll Google it. But that's how a lot has come in off the table. Like I'll start seeing in my mind's eye these grid line of light, and I go, well, what's that? And then somebody will say, like in some call later after I started seeing that years ago now, they said light body. I went, oh, I wonder, to me it looks like a comb jellyfish with, all the little light circuits moving around. And so I would take a screenshot of a comb jelly on my phone, and then I Googled light body. And so, to me, that's how a lot of knowledge comes in that then I feel like I can trust as something I can kind of hold on to and continue with. But I think probably everyone on this video is mystical, has a mystical nature, and is tracking. And so I would just really encourage people to track what is coming in, and you can even feel it, how it comes into your body. Does it come into your solar plexus, at the diaphragm? Does it come into your heart center? Does it come into your mind? Does it come in as a headache and pressure in your head? How is it coming in physically, these things that you're connected to, and how can you really begin to embody them and let them, they're only a problem if they get stuck in your body, and they get mucked up in our boundary markers and our contracted selves that, because we were born into what I call the operating system of fear. and how do we let these things flow through us and move into what I call operating system OS love, which is, I think, our innate operating system. We were born into an aberrated reality, which is fine, because we have, I think we have everything innate within the design of our human body. And then my investigation is, these last 6 years, is the spirit and what is in this etheric realm, and who are we as our timeless and essential beingnesses? Who do we be? To then, for me, start informing the cells from that direction, because I've always informed them from a matter direction. But something fascinating to me is, like, Tantra has always been informing from the spirit. She's lived most of her life dominantly spirit, and in the last 6 years, what we've been truly working on is her embodiment, which she's been successfully, doing, and is, like, now has all these markers of, like, loving to cook, loving to eat, noticing when her body's feeling a certain way. She's actually regenerating in her body. And what we've noticed is, that's what the MetaBody is all about, is when you really tend to the spirit and the flesh and live in both of those in your body, that timeless eternal nature kicks in, and all of a sudden we're seeing miracles happen where people are regenerating, and we have actual markers of that. Things like, I'm off my thyroid medication. Not that I'm recommending that at all. That thyroid medication absolutely saved my life when I needed it, and it gave me my feeling of being me. And I don't know if I'm going to stay off it, but for now I'm off it because my body said, you don't need to be on it. And I think the reason why is because my spirit is moving in such a way that I have a vitality in my system through I call it source, like resourcing source energy, that I'm not just living off my own physiology. So my physiology has been able to heal quite a lot because I'm now in my direct link with that so above, so below, in a way I've never been, I would say, as an adult. I think I definitely had that as a child, and even into my 20s. But now I'm really regaining that, so that I'm not just living off of the fuel sources in my physiology, which is, I love going in, and I have actually a blog post on what are the fuel sources of your physiology, because I had to do that piece too. I had to make sure my adrenals were balanced and my thyroid was tended to and all of that. But how do we move beyond that and really be a resourcing of source, so that we can live off of this vitality and light and spirit that is innate to us in our human form? So
Thank you.
that was more than I expected.
A few things before we close the call today. Thank you for being here. And thank those of you that watch. I was really startled to see how many replays of the Facebook Live and Create a World. I was still trying to figure out how to get us on YouTube. And in the process of doing that, I saw that almost 500 people had somehow found their way to the videos. And I'm really very serious about that. I'm not people-centric, I'm feel-centric. And what I find is the people that come on these videos, come on these lives, and be with us, is we are creating a coherency in, as Heather said, the EMS world. And which was, I want to point out, I want to say a couple of things that happened in the prophetics. It's also why I have this private Facebook page, because there needs to be a place for certain conversations to be had, that you don't have a world pouncing on you that says that's not the truth and that is the truth, and why did you say that and what does that mean? We really do need the observer nature of ourselves. So there are three things I want to say, and we'll close at the top of the hour. One is I had an extraordinary 4-minute conversation with a man named Julio. He was talking about what we're confronting right now as an evolutionary process of consciousness. He didn't term it that way, but we could definitely fit his conversation into that. And one of the things I had noticed is in a group I have that works with me in the archetype of the eye magi and the eye guardian at the gate, there's a latent fear that I couldn't put my finger on. About 8+ years ago, I had started what turned out to be a 7-year journey with a group of people to really build a field of, I think Heather would actually say empathy. Because the word is so corrupted, I don't often use it. Empathy is the technology of creation in physical form. That's what empathy is. It's simply that we're always in communication with everything, as Heather, we are. We are empathy. There's no we have it, we are it. Mm-hmm. And we are creation embodied, and the embodied creation we are is empathy, and that's kind of that about that. And, but it was strange, so when I set up the 7-year group, we practiced transparency. People became very transparent, especially emotionally transparent, and there was what we call shared field, where people were able to be vulnerable and really say the things that people can't say because they're afraid, as Heather said, they don't want people to think they're crazy. So it was strange to me, this kind of phenomenon that was happening, particularly in the I Magi group, because I could feel this collective fear, all individuated. It was like feeling this collective fear, but everybody was private about it. Nobody even knew they had it. But how I knew they had it is they couldn't open their mouths and ask a question. And you know that. Every one of you has a childhood. Don't ask your mother that. Don't ask your father that. You'll just be put down, most parents, or your teacher. Julio said that he didn't get good grades from asking questions in school. He got good grades from having answers. So why I'm bringing this up is, no kidding, we're on an edge. I mean, it's everywhere. And when I went into the prophetics, I was stunned out of my mind. I'm still stunned. Because there was no trace of trauma in any of the prophetics. Not even one. There was confusion. And there were people being in the face of things that they had no registers for. But there was no trauma. And the prophetics are about your direct link with creation. They're a very different medium than we presently have the awareness of. They're a direct transmission. It's like creation telling us what's up. What's up? And what's up is we're more conscious than we realize. We're more aware than we realize. And I think Heather did a great job, which means, do you know that we become more sensitive? We become more anxious. We become more, when the body starts to not be calcified by terror or fear, we begin to feel it. We begin to feel this border that she talked about, this border about, dare I believe paradise is on its way? Dare I think that this is the end of an era where that which that goes against life is corrupted, is collapsing from its corruption, and that which operates on behalf of life is rising. Dare I hope? And every human being, what Julio talked about, is we have collective trauma. As a species, we have collective trauma. We were dumbed down. We don't know what did that. We were harmed for our innocence. We don't know what did that. One of the perfect examples is the Mayan culture. And if Maru's on, I apologize. It could have been the Aztec culture. My history phenomenon is a little word poor. But they literally gave fruits and vegetables and shared the harvest with their gods. Their direct link with these beings that they adored and loved them. And then these other gods came. Within the space of 50 years, there was blood sacrifice. That was a God thing. That were beings that came down here and terrorized humanity and made them hate each other. Made them believe that this earth they were on didn't love them and wasn't there for them. We have had, and I know I'm affecting some of your guts. I can feel it. But that's where we're at. You know, that's all inside of us is a collective nature. So we can talk all we want to about individual awakening, and a lot of us have been awakening individually, but we're feeling what stopped the show in humanity. We're feeling the evolutionary crisis that didn't get to continue to have us expand into more and more and more paradise. We're feeling it. And guess what? We're here. We're at the edge. And some things happened in the prophetics that we're going to talk about. Right now, we're going to work out all the bugs about how to get on YouTube, create a world, because that's the space I was given to unpack these conversations. It was given to me by a higher power, not a higher power like a thing that came and talked to me and stepped on my head, but like that mystical mind that she talks about that gives us information that goes beyond the structure of humanity that we presently exist in. So create a world is important. It's important because it wasn't, if you could be back in the Old Testament or even the New Testament, it would be where something came and said, go, create a world. Just open up the space. Let's create a world. And not by telling what we think is real or true, but by being present to what there is to be present to, giving us a chance to open up into what there is to open up into, and being able, as Heather so beautifully demonstrated, to be able to be on that edge. Mm-hmm. You know, she was in anxiety when I met her. That was not fake. It was not neurotic. It was biological. And she was the one that kept herself at that border. She's the one that dismantled the mechanisms that had her say, don't go any further. Suppress, 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 dumb down, dumb down, dumb down, don't feel, don't feel, don't feel, don't be present to what there is to be present to, don't open up into what there is to open up into. Kick, 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 kick. That's our collective memory. And every one of you that goes out beyond that border breaks that border up just a little bit more until humanity is no longer living in a myth of hate and violence.
Division.
Yeah,
us against them.
And throwing each other off the cliff as blood sacrifice. And what I saw in this prophetics has changed me beyond belief. And it was you I read. It was you. And every one of you, particularly those that had never even talked to me before, didn't know me from anything. You know, the report back was how it fit. How they got out past the border. Because our consciousness is out past the border, and it's dragging our body and our personalities over with it. And the body's complying. Personalities, we'll see how they do. But once the body starts to comply, once the body begins to become awake, as that funny thing that happened to me in Ireland a long time, it doesn't matter if you're sad or lonely, you belong to the one and only, it's over now. So we are in the transition out of what has been many of us. I wouldn't say all of us, but the beauty of a human being is we're a symbiotic species. The more of us that get past the border and begin to trust, as I said in the beginning of the call, we begin to know ourself. Ourself, not the self that we have to agree with, the world has to agree with us and we have to agree with it. Ourself. And to be true to it. The more that happens, we're all past the border. And then we'll meet up. We'll meet up after we're on the border. We'll share. We'll see what happened. We'll share with each other how we got there. That's what we're doing in Create a World. We'll share. But it's an individual journey with a collective response. Very important to know. It's an individual journey with a collective response. And those responses are in the prophetic. Mm-hmm. So the thing that I saw, which So in what I'm going for is February is still like field phenomenon. We'll see what shows up every Friday. We'll see who calls me and says, let's talk, or who ends up being with me wherever I'm sitting, in this case, Heather. And then in March, we're really going to start moving into collective conversations around the MetaBody. Because the interesting thing about The Mind of Creation, the book that is in the process of being published, is that we are a collective mind now. We are that. How many of you are saying, oh, I go listen to this, I go listen to that, I go listen to that? Well, that's the collective mind that each of us is part of, building itself back. It's building itself back. So what I said to Heather, and I think we'll talk about it after we get off the call, but I think that it even surprised her how much she had to say. Mm-hmm. Because we're in a shared listening. We're in a molecular, cellular, atomic particle field of consciousness that is like music without hearing the sound. And we're responding to it. But the thing I'm going to complete with is what happened in the prophetics, particularly in two prophetics. What happened is I went, oh my God, we have eternal organs. We have organs that register the eternal. And in the activation last night, for those of you who were on it, I got on that activation. I couldn't have been happier because, it's over now. That little amygdala, they really are restored. They are really going to tell you when you're good to go. That everything's okay and you're good to go. They really are. They're really tired of being thrown off the cliff as blood sacrifice. They're really tired of being what registers trauma in the human body. They're not even designed for it. Overworked and underpaid. So there's a lot of phenomenon that we're going to talk about, and the nice thing is that your body knows if we speak truth. Your personality doesn't matter. Sorry to offend, but the body knows when it hears truth. It registers it because the body's innate. The body isn't programmable for very long before kicking back, before fighting its way back out. That's its promise to our spirit. That's its magic. That's its beauty. That's its heaven. We're our body's heaven. And I say, our bodies are beginning to remember. I'm 75 years old. I am in better shape now than I have been my entire physical life. And it isn't anything I can ever explain. I'm obnoxious. I'm so alive. Even to me, I'm obnoxious. I'm so alive.
Can I say one more thing before we close also?
Yeah, we got 2 minutes.
So I also wanted to just put into the field, the project that I'm working on, the field that I'm working to develop is called Vitality Medicine. And basically what I am paying attention to is vitality and the return of vitality to the system, which, Tantra is talking about also. And no matter what compromised that vitality through human history, to me doesn't matter. The fact is it's been compromised, but it's innate. So how do we remember it and embody it, really? And so I've developed a Facebook page under my name with Vitality Medicine, and then also a private membership with Mighty Networks, which is a really lovely alternative to Facebook. And that I'll just put my website, the Heather Hunt DC, in the comments, and then people can get to that if you want to be involved. Because what I realized is, I was tired of kind of generating this on my own and with Tantra, and so I made that space so that it could be like a co-creation space also. So I'd love to have anybody interested in these conversations hop over there as well.
It's great. So we both want to thank you. Several of you came on the calls for when we were writing Mind of Creation. Because of you, that book will now get published, but now, because it's in the shared listening, I can hear what's up, not in my individual noggin between my two ears. And there's a lot to be appreciated. right now for me, and a lot of excitement about the future. And try to keep your head out of the things that make you a blood sacrifice, okay? It'd be a good idea. And try to stick your head into things that make us want to share the harvest. I think that would be a lovely way to go in the next few years, because a lot has to sort itself out. And what has to sort itself out goes beyond just us as human beings. Mm-hmm. The earth is sorting itself out. The consciousness of the creation where we were one with greater powers and forces of creation is sorting itself out. And we're good to go.